I will now call back to order the regular meeting of Lake Forest School District 67 Board of Education for December 11th, 2017. May I have a roll call, please, Eileen?
Dr. Lemke?
Here.
Mrs. Sands?
Here.
Mr. Folker?
Here.
Mr. Burkowski?
Here.
Mr. Novitt?
Here.
Both Mrs. Levert and Mr. Ford have let us know that they will not be available for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Later tonight, we will be having the annual assessment report, but for this report, I've chosen a different topic, which is gratitude. Here's my 2017 District 67 Top 10 Gratitude List. Number 1, I'm grateful for working alongside 6 outstanding board members. Last week, the Lake Forest Caucus asked me to review a list of what a good board member looks like. I replied, what I look for in a good board member. I want board members who are smart, thoughtful, open-minded, good listeners, care about education, team players, hardworking, and make the time to focus on the job. I'm fortunate that those descriptions accurately describe the great people that sit with me at this table. Speaking of the people that sit with me at this table, my second item on the list is I'm also grateful that Mike Semick is our superintendent. Mike is a thought leader and has a fantastic vision for our district, and he's working extremely hard to make this vision a reality. Mike has taught me so much, and I consider him to be the smartest person in Lake Forest in educational matters. Speaking of visions, the third item on my gratitude list is the vision statement that our board, in collaboration with the community, created 4 years ago. That vision has become a living part of our district, and it drives behavior at all levels. I'm grateful for having that vision, as it provides a valuable compass to align our decisions against. Number 4, I'm grateful for the entire admin and supports team. These are the people at the central office who help steer the ship, reviewing and implementing new curriculum, ensuring we acquire and develop the best talent, keeping our finances in good shape. These also include our building principals and other support staff who are critical to our district running smoothly. A special shout out on this item to Eileen Fowler. She usually manages to stay out of the spotlight, but she is nothing short of awesome in keeping me, our superintendent, and many others in the right place at the right time with the right materials while juggling 2 district calendars, 14 board members, and more meetings than I care to count. So thank you. Fifth, I'm grateful for our teachers and other classroom personnel. Our vision calls for world-class talent, and I believe that is exactly what we have. Yes, we can always improve and further develop, but for tonight, I'm grateful for the hard work, the dedication, and the care for every student that our teachers have. Sixth, I'm grateful for our students. All kids are wonderful, but our student body is pretty special. They are smart, articulate, and mostly well-rounded. They're passionate, and many of them understand that education really does matter. And while they go through some interesting years during middle school, they're mostly kind and respectful. In a word, our students are fantastic. As I mentioned students, the next item on my gratitude list is my kids, John and Katie. Because of them, I've had the chance to get to know hundreds of students and parents that I would otherwise not have known. All of that, from daily interactions with their teachers to hearing about the latest science projects and on, all of that provides a great perspective on how our district is doing as we strive to achieve our vision. Beyond the utilitarian function that my kids provide in measuring performance against our vision, they also bring me much joy. 8, I'm grateful for the parents in our community. One of the critical success factors in education is supportive parents. We're fortunate to have smart, passionate, dedicated parents who want what's best for their kids. Our parents, for the most part, view their children's education as a partnership between the schools and the home. They're willing to volunteer, to help in school buildings, to learn new math so they can help with homework, to fundraise, and on. Our students are incredibly fortunate to have these parents, and I'm grateful that we have these parents also. The 9th item on my gratitude list is financial resources. Achieving an ambitious vision costs money, and I'm grateful to live in a community that has some. Having financial resources allow us to hire world-class teachers, to perform basic upkeep of aging buildings, and also to move forward on larger projects, such as the Haskins renovation and classroom transformations. We're very fortunate to have the money and resources that we have, and I'm grateful for every single dollar in our budget. And number 10, last but certainly not least, I'm incredibly grateful to my wife, Renee. Without her support, I would not be on this board, and I certainly would not be in this role. We all put a lot of time as board members. We all put in a lot of time as board members, and I'm definitely fortunate to have a wonderful and supportive wife at my side. So that's my 2017 District 67 gratitude list. I hope everyone has a safe and fun holiday season, and I encourage everyone to think about your experience at District 67 and perhaps make your own gratitude list. If you care to share your list, feel free to email it to the board or tweet it out with hashtag FindingJoy67. In the midst of constantly pushing forward to improve, it is easy sometimes to lose sight of all the wonderful things that we already have. We are very fortunate, and I am grateful. That concludes the President's report. We now move to the Superintendent's report.
Our reason for being is to inspire and empower all students to maximize their growth as learners. The vision is where you want to go as an organization. The school board's charged to the administration to make these things happen. So we want to be an innovative learning community that educates without boundaries, where all students cultivate their minds and create enduring connections and discover their passions. Another part of the charge is the milestones, mini vision statements. One of them is that our instruction will be highly differentiated, inquiry-based, and driven by students' needs, interests, and passions. Think back to how you learned in school. It was didactic instruction. Desks in a row, pointed at the front of the classroom. Teacher talked, kids listened. 1, maybe 2 interactions per class period, amazingly ineffective. It goes into short-term memory and it leaves. What stays is inquiry-based experiential learning. And we have all kinds of different inquiry units going on throughout District 67 now. How can we utilize the outdoor classroom to educate our kids rather than simply within the 4 walls? In one of our elementary classes, they wanted to learn about why all the trees in the community were dying. So the teachers arranged to have the city come and cut down a tree. So the whole class went out, watched this happen, and they learned 2 things from this. 1, how you cut down a tree. But all the communication had to be silent. It's all hand signals. And then when they were done, the team that cut down the tree asked the kids what they noticed, what they observed. And so then the kids reported out on this. And it was really meaningful to the kids, and that's what we're after. Our writing program is individualized and is personalized, where kids write about what's called a small moment, something that is personal to them. It's iterative. It's one attempt after the next, after the next, after the next, and always improving on that piece of writing. In this video clip, what you see is young students, these are 3rd graders, talking about how they want to become better writers this year. And this sheet of paper is all of their ideas on how they want to become better writers. Young students can create meaningful goals for themselves when you begin to critically think about how you are approaching a task and your own thinking relative to that task. It's called metacognition. It's thinking about your thinking. And that's where a lot of learning takes place. Why is inquiry important? Because it leverages kids' natural curiosity.
What would you do if you ran out of water?
Have you heard of a sloth being on the highway?
Ooh, this is a very good question.
The pursuit of things that students find interesting. So that highlights some of the things that we've been doing in the district as far as inquiry goes over the last several years. The trees that they were cutting down weren't random trees, full disclosure. They were ash trees, and one of the things that was vexing to students was that almost every student in the class had an ash tree, either in their yard or a friend's yard. One of the kids pointed out, my dad wrote a check for $5,000 to have these trees cut down. Why are they all dying? So that was part 1 of the superintendent's report. The second part I want to talk to you about was we had a very successful event this past week, this past Monday, 1 week ago. The author of How to Raise an Adult was in the district, Julie Lithcott-Hames. She spent the day with us, came and met with a group of parents and some of our leaders of the APT and Spirit for lunch, spent time with them, then also met in this room with our entire K4 staff, the entire staff, and had a couple hours with them. She is a very dynamic speaker, and then she did yet another program in the evening for about another 2 hours where, again, she did something totally different than she had done in the other places. About 330 to 350 people were present for that. And every piece of feedback I've gotten so far has been really, really positive. I think at least 3 of you were there, if I'm not mistaken. Would anybody care to share their takeaways from that evening? Or
My husband went on behalf of our family, and he came home very impressed. He had learned quite a bit, and he was just very impressed with the whole experience and the opportunity to learn about parenting that was being provided in our community, and he valued it tremendously.
I've heard from a number of parents. Some of them had planned on going. Others had been told to go by their spouses, saying, hey, I think you should go to this. What is gratifying is to hear that already, yes, I bought the book now, but I've already changed a number of things that I'm doing as a parent. She was kind enough to allow us to videotape it, so we are going to be able to utilize that for future purposes. We've used it for staff development already, having some of our staff watch that were unable to attend. The third part of the superintendent's report is I have good news to share about NSSED, the work that's ongoing there. Suzanne will doubtless share some things later on as well. From a superintendent's perspective, I wanted to share my enthusiasm for the mission, vision, and goal work that they have undertaken as an organization. And they've gone through some storming, and they're in the process of, I think, being headed towards norming now, and then finally the goals will help them begin performing. And they have a new and very dynamic and visionary superintendent there. It's always a pleasure to report that District 67 is one of only 2 districts, District 109 and District 67, that met the criteria in a recent report from the state on the inclusion of students with special needs being in classrooms. Of all of the 18-member districts, we were one of only 2 of those districts. And when they show slices of the pie, a pie chart that shows who uses the NSSED services, in my estimation, this is where you want to have a tiny fraction of that pie rather than a large slice, and we are the tiniest fraction on that pie. So I applaud the work that NSSED staff are doing in conjunction with, obviously, their board, which is the group that needs to own and authorize and approve this mission, vision, and goal work. But it is headed, I think, in a very good direction, and I'm pleased to see that progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions or comments for our superintendent? Seeing none, we move to public participation. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board? Seeing none, we move to reports. Our first report is the assessment report. Mike and Susan?
Our reason for being, the vision is where you want to go as an organization. The school board's charged to the administration to make these things happen.
We would love to listen to you again.
All right, yeah, my sonorous voice there. What's not to like? So I would like to thank Susan for all of her work. There's a huge amount of pre-work that goes into preparing an assessment report, And this is the culmination of many months, and I would say probably more like 12 months worth of work. And would like to, we're going straight to questions? Or do you have a presentation as well? You have a few slides?
Yep.
Have it.
So in light of what in the superintendent's report, I just do want to highlight the fact that this assessment report is an academic assessment report, and we as a district are continuing our work to incorporate more social emotional learning and more opportunities with the second edition of the personalized student portrait coming out. We're continuing on that path, but this report is the academic side of our reporting. So we always try to refer back to these milestones, and this particular report is highlighting the assessment milestone that we continue to work towards with multidimensional assessments, again, used to identify holistic growth. This is indeed the academic side. So in the report, you notice two different sections. We generally look at assessment both from an attainment standpoint of how did our students do getting towards those standards, meeting and exceeding standards. For that attainment piece, we do use the PARCC assessment. And then we also look at how are our students growing compared to how they have grown in the past. And for that, we look at growth on PARCC as well as growth on MAP. We have more historical MAP data. As PARCC is still relatively new, we took our third assessment in the spring, but both can be used to look at growth. So just some big takeaways. Details are in the report, but we do want to highlight that we did see growth in our PARCC scores. More students were reaching that meeting and exceeding the standards than in the past. We raised our percentile within our comp group of peer districts, our 18 peer districts that we compare ourselves against. And that within that comparison group, last year we were sitting about the 25th percentile within that group, and now we, based on last year's scores, moved to the 40th percentile. So that is some significant gains. We also saw an increase in overall ELA PARCC scores to the tune of over 8%, where our peer districts only showed about 1%. So that was also some nice gains to see. In terms of growth, we grew pretty consistently to historically, but it's important to note that we have historically grown students well, which in the end of the report, there is some historical data on how we've grown students using the MAP assessment in the past. And we, on average, will grow students from second grade, about the 73rd national percentile, up towards 80 percentile nationally once students reach 8th grade. So we are growing our students at a faster rate than the nation. So that is good, even if we are able to maintain that. But there were areas that we saw higher than expected growth, specifically in the area of PARCC, and specifically at the middle school. Both in 7th and 8th grade, they showed higher than expected growth in reading and writing, and in 6th grade in reading, very, very close to higher than expected in writing as well. So some inferences that we can make from this data. Again, inferences, not necessarily conclusions, as this is still growing our understanding of PARCC as an assessment tool, but it does, based on our data in 2016-17, this curricular alignment that we have done to standards and the adoption of new curriculum and working really tirelessly to help our teachers grow in these areas is beginning to translate to student achievement. Do we want to continue to improve? Absolutely. But it is starting to move in that right direction. We will continue to analyze strengths and areas of improvement so that we can find if there are any holes that we need to fill or anything like that. We also paid close attention last year to making sure that our students felt prepared to go into the test and had really positive testing environments for that, and that seems to have had an impact. Questions? Mm-hmm.
You have it on here so we can scroll to it if they
I don't, but I have it here. Going once, going twice.
Any questions for Susan or Mike?
Otherwise, I'm going to walk away.
So I really like the assessment report. I read it start to finish last night. It was a really great read.
Thank you, Rob.
The only thing, my biggest suggestion is, how about a bigger font for us old guys? 'Cause I couldn't read anything. I just have a couple general questions, I think. So,
Rob, can I interrupt and say, you said you liked it? Why?
it was well written. I think Susan wrote it, and it was very clear. You know, every section said, this is what you're about to see, and then you could see it. I thought it was very, very clear, well written, and that's what I liked. I wasn't commenting about the results. The results speak for themselves. So, but it was a really, I think compared to years past, I don't remember seeing something like this. I think if this was up on the website, which I imagine it's going up, is good for everyone to read. So,
Thank you.
yeah, no, excellent job that way. But there are a ton of numbers in here, and I'm not on the education committee. So one question I would ask is there a district goal? That could be in Mike's goals, that could be for the district, for this board. Is there 4 numbers here that are more important than any other 4 numbers? Is there something that we are really tracking that's important to you guys? And I might have a couple comments about what I think is most important, but I'd really like to know what you guys think are most important. I could ask it a different way as well, so go ahead.
Yeah, so to my mind, there are a couple, and this, I think, anticipates some of the work that we should be doing, which are key performance indicators for the district. So in my mind, there are 2 that jump out immediately from the K-8. The first one is whether or not students are reading at grade level by grade 3. So at the end of grade 2, are students reading at grade level? That is a critical juncture for every student, because 3rd grade is where the kids shift from learning to read to reading to learn, and literally everything that follows 3rd grade on requires kids to be able to read in order to access information. So that is one. Another one that is meaningful in my mind is on the MAP scores. We have a lot of historical data there, more than with the park, so we can look back over many years and see that. We also have a community that both understands and appreciates MAP more than they do park, for example. I'm concerned that park may be a transient test. We'll see what happens in the next year or 2. But the percentile, when you look at a large number, the N on the MAP scores, if we begin in the low 70s in 2nd grade, and by the 8th grade we are gaining in terms of our national percentile rank, that looks to me like a consistently incredible number that we should be tracking. Those are the 2 that jump out at me.
Okay. Should you push back on both of those?
Please do.
The first one, where is it?
That's separately reported from my goals.
Yeah, I think if that's, and you and I have talked about that, I think that's a great goal, and great for your goal, great for the district goal. If this is the assessment report, maybe it doesn't belong in here, but certainly that needs to be shared with us, and I think that needs to be one of these dashboard things. I think that's a great goal.
Yeah.
Okay?
Those are, that data, we don't have standardized test data. The data point we have from that is second grade is the first time we do MAP. The assessment that we utilize for that, in addition to that one MAP score that we have, is the Fountas and Pinnell. That is not a standardized test. So what you're seeing here are the results of standardized testing.
Yeah, but we also get to control this. And so if that's going to be something that the district puts their thumb on and says, we care about that,
Right.
maybe it belongs. Right. On the other one, there's two pushbacks. So when I say numbers you want to drive, so the start of the assessment report talks about what Susan talked about before, about the 73rd percentile to this 80th percentile. Am I hearing from you guys that that's a number? So the fact that it went from 73 to 80, I actually don't think that's a huge change. It's an important change, but wouldn't it be better to go from 73 to 90? And so do we care about the percentile of our 8th graders achieving some level? And if we do, what would you choose? Would it be percent meets or exceeds on Park? Would it be some sort of MAP score? Do we have a goal to drive our 8th graders to? Or is that not as important as, say, the 3rd grade reading literacy goal?
Yeah, I'll answer and I'll let Susan. I think one of the things that we have done a nice job of focusing on, and I think importantly so, is to not focus solely on attainment. So a cut score that is used for Park, for example, is there is a degree of arbitrariness to that is concerning to me, very frankly. So in order to say, hey, we want everybody to reach a level of attainment, it depends much more on where that student started. So it can be that if a student grew significantly and didn't even approach attainment, that would be cause for celebration. That's what you get more with the MAP scores. So you see that kind of growth listed more. So looking at whether or not a cohort attained or not, I think is always going to come with some caveats for me, but I'll let Susan jump in.
I agree that we want to keep our eye on growth as much as possible. I do also, I think and in our discussions last year, we do still need to look at Park, as it is an assessment that measures whether our students are meeting the standards in more than a computer adaptive way, but in a meaningful way that matches what we're asking of them. So I do think what I would like to see is us get better each year. We did set in the strategic plan, we set goals for what that better looks like in both attainment and growth, where we did break that apart to say on both Park and MAP what that would look like. So I think some of those numbers may be found in the strategic plan.
Right. So give me just a couple more minutes, guys, and then I'll be done. I need that more of I need somebody to make that connection for me more, because I'm not on education, but I can reach out and have somebody make that connection.
Sure.
I guess part of my question is, we talk about moving from the 25th percentile to the 40th percentile, and that's good movement, right? The fact is, we remain, and one of the scores, I guess it's some sort of combined thing, at 67 percentile, 67% making some progress. And the best district in our group is at 81%, right? To put that in context, if half of our students who are not at that level, if our goal was to get half of them there, we would then be at the top percentile, right? Is that a goal we have? And what I've just heard you say is we sort of do have that as a goal. It might not be for next year, but we are making incremental progress. So I like that a lot. Back to Mike's response quickly. I think that's fine to make an argument that we don't have a certain standard that we're shooting for, and to say, listen, MAP's all about growth. Well, what we could do is we could look at what kindergarten or first grade MAP scores are, and right on the dime project where you're going to be in the 8th grade, and ask how many people get there, right? So a whole, like, a holistic 67 point of view. And last question, and this is, in some sense, food for thought, and in some sense, I'd really like to know the answer, but I don't know if we're going to get it. When was Bridges adopted?
Bridges was adopted K4 in 2013-14, and in fifth grade 14-15.
When was Calkins adopted?
Writing was in, you're making me go back in my
15,
years.
16.
15, 16,
Suzanne said 15,
and reading was last year, 16, 17.
So I asked my wife last night this question, and she didn't have a good answer yet. So I'm still waiting for her to tell me the answer. The part about the assessment report that I like the most is the map stuff. This historical map, I think that's really good. And so I asked my wife, I said, if you look at any of these columns doing this, right, this part where, right, and you knew there was a curricular adoption in 2015, let's say, couldn't you somehow use this data to say Bridges is being successful, Calkins is being successful? But if I look at any of these columns, picking the 2011 number and guessing that that's what we're going to hit in 2017 probably is a pretty good guess. It doesn't seem to me like there's like these numbers are moving at all, and if they are, it's sort of randomly about our mean. Is there a way the district actually thinks about using MAP scores to assess the value of Bridges or Calkins, right? If you know, there's a date of implementation and there's historical data, and maybe the point is that there's too few data points, but as a data person, I don't love that argument, right? So how do you think about that? Like, do you ever use this to evaluate the curriculum?
Ideally, yes, we do use our data to help us understand how our implementation is going, if it's having the intended effect. We did talk some about this last year around the assessment report as well. The difference between the assessments, being PARC and MAP, is somewhat significant in this particular question that you're asking, because MAP hasn't changed and our instruction has, and a lot of our instructional outputs are more visible on an assessment like PARC, because our kids are able to think deeply and express that in a way that that assessment asks more than a MAP. I'm not saying that our kids should not grow on MAP as a result of our implementations. I'm definitely not saying that. We should see it in both places. But what I will say is sometimes the harder you work to get children to see multiple solutions and multiple ways to get to an end, sometimes they do struggle to find the right multiple choice answer. We need to be working on both, and we should see the payoff in both. Does that help at all?
I appreciate that you've thought about it, because I think that's the first step. So I don't know enough about MAP to say I agree or disagree. It sounds like a very good argument. I wish we would be seeing better PARC scores and PARC scores moving in the right direction. And I know we sort of think they are, but they really aren't moving much. Maybe after next year, if we go from 40th to 60th, and the year after that, yeah, then you're absolutely right. I guess maybe because my kids came through on MAP, I just feel a tendency that I understand that.
It's a very linear progression.
But I'm glad you're thinking about it, so that's important.
I would also point out that one of the things that we learned from last year's assessment report was that many of the districts that perform better on PARC, in fact, have band, orchestra, and choir outside the school day, and so there's a very significant differential in the number of minutes that kids have language arts and math in some districts, and District 67 has made a priority out of doing everything, having that in school rather than having those things outside the school day.
Other questions?
So I would just like to echo, this is for sure the highest quality assessment report that I've seen since I've been looking at them. And I also wanted to echo something that I heard Dr. Lemke saying that I think is important for us to think about. We already are thinking about this idea of dashboard and what are the key things that we're looking at. I think it is also time, and you implied this a little bit, Susan, but for us to continue on the road to thinking about this report as potentially being a lot more than just a report about how we did on standardized tests. And so, I would say, based on what I heard Dr. Lemke saying, based on the conversations that we're having just as a district, I think it would be worthwhile to start to think about what other kinds of information could be in this report that might even be more useful than some of the information that is in this report, in terms of helping us understand where our kids are. And if there are connections to strategic plan that can be highlighted in that process, so that we don't have to make those connections, even more the better. But I will say also, I was very pleased to see our movement within our peer group on this, because we're all trying to get after the same rabbit, if you will, and for us to be able to move in that group means that we move differently than some of our peers in some ways. And I think that's a positive thing. And hopefully we'll still have Park in the future to figure that out with.
I have a couple things too. Again, thank you for all the hard work. And in the presentation of the Education Committee a week or so ago, you guys did a great job. And thank you for taking into account the feedback that you were given. A couple of things. I will echo Rob and Suzanne in the sense that I know we've talked about a district goals and district scorecard or dashboard, whatever we call it. I think that's a great idea. And a lot of things, Mike, you were talking about, we should be included. And some of the ideas that you had, Rob, we should be including that. Regarding 8th grade proficiency, I actually think if you look at our relationship at the high school as a customer-supplier relationship, we supply them with students who had better be ready to learn at that next level. And if I'm the customer of District 67, my expectation is that a certain amount of students are achieving or proficient enough to succeed at the next level. So I think an 8th grade goal of a certain level of proficiency on Park is indeed an excellent thing to strive for. Growth is not discounting growth, because you still want to grow every year, but the reality is once they leave our charge, we should have adequately prepared them to succeed at the next level. That's really why we're here, right? So I think that's a great goal to put in there, and we should be aggressive in what that proficiency level is. I also liked how you said you were inferring from the data as opposed to concluding from the data. As we talked in the Education Committee meeting, we have 3 years worth of data on Park, which is nowhere near enough to conclusively say this is working or this is not working. I think we can infer from some things that have happened this year that we're hopefully headed in the right direction, but hopefully in the next couple of years we'll learn more. I would also like to point out that as opposed to saying that this year we've improved, the question might be, based on looking back all 3 years, did we rebound from a bad year last year and got back to where we should be, as opposed to necessarily saying we've improved. So while it is an improvement per se, if you look at all 3 years worth of data, 3 years ago we were at this level. Last year we really tanked. This year we're actually back to where we were 2 years ago. So that's good, but so I hope that it's both. It's saying we've figured out what we didn't do last year, we've recovered from that, and it's the start of a trend. We'll know more in a few years, a couple of years. And then lastly, the one thing that I would also add relative to a district scorecard or something we need to continue to make sure we're talking about is the elimination of unsatisfactory growth amongst students. We talk about how at a macro level our children do a wonderful job of hitting their expected growth levels, but we still do have kids that don't across a variety of the different tests. And I think it's our responsibility, based on our core values, that we eliminate that as best we can. That at some point in the future, we don't have any kids that are not growing satisfactorily. Even if it's low, at least they're growing. So I'd like to see that continue to be discussed at a high level too. So otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just a comment for our board members. As you probably recall, we recently had our board self-evaluation, and one of the outcomes of that is that we'll be developing board goals, which I expect to occur in January. And from my notes from that meeting, we didn't set as a board goal, but I expect we may well set as a board goal the development of district KPI, key performance indicators, a dashboard. So everything we just talked about likely will go into that. And I would encourage the administration, you can see that coming. This board is likely going to set a board goal that we are going to create a dashboard and stop talking about it, because we've been talking about it for, well, I've been on the board 4.5 years. So you can see that coming, and you can think about what you think might be relevant on an actual dashboard. So, thank you, this was great.
Thank you.
Kent, any final comments you'd like to make? No? Fantastic. Thank you both very much. All right, moving on, we next have, I believe, the Gallup report. Fantastic. Ingrid, thank you.
Okay. Good evening. As you know, oh, let me play this. I need my glasses. As you know, we gave the Gallup student poll to students in grades 5 and 7 this October. It measures 4 broad areas of engagement, hope, entrepreneurial aspirations, and career and financial literacy. What I've added on this slide is examples of some supportive actions under each of those areas. Just let you take a second to look at some of those supportive actions. So we're doing a lot of work in our schools around these types of supportive actions. And so what's nice about giving the Gallup student poll is that we can look at how our students are doing, what their perceptions are in these areas, and then we can look at aligning our practices of where are we successfully implementing some of the supportive strategies, and then where are some possible gaps that we need to work on. Here's some information also. Lake Forest High School gave the Gallup National Student Poll in grades 9, 10, and 11, which gives you a little bit of a progression. And we have been collaborating with the high school leadership, and so we'll be looking forward to getting together to looking at results for 5, 7, 9, 10, and 11, and looking at some trend data. Some of our general observations, just preliminarily, is looking at engagement, that students reported feeling more engaged in grade 5 than grade 7, and then it gains steam as students go through their high school years. With hope, that was also the case in grades 5 compared to grade 7, and peaking in grade 9 for that. And then entrepreneurial aspirations, students were a little higher in grade 7 than 5, which makes sense because as they go through the system, they're working on more entrepreneurial things. And career and financial literacy were pretty consistent with our results from grades 5 and 7. And then student connection to staff appeared stronger in grade 5, and then was a strength also at the high school in grade 11. And what we're going to do, we just got the results recently, so we haven't been able to go through them as a group. So the first thing is to share it out with our administrative team at our next instructional leadership team meeting. Also share results with our staff, and then discuss results with our Lake Forest High School partners. and then identify supportive efforts and look at any gap analysis where we might want to work on creating more energy around some of those areas that we've identified. And then we would really like to do some focus groups with students so that we can get more information and present some of the questions that are in the survey and ask kids to give us a little bit more information about what they were thinking and what examples come to their mind as they're answering those questions. And then communicating with parents as well. There's a lot of really good suggestions from the Gallup organization about how parents can help drive engagement and drive hope and career and financial literacy and entrepreneurial aspirations, tips and suggestions for parents and families, and then develop future planning around some of those goals that are identified through the analysis process. Are there any specific questions about the information?
I have several, Ingrid.
Yeah.
First of all, is it actually zero cost in terms of dollars?
There is, it is free to take the survey. We did pay a small fee, and I actually have the invoice if you want me to dig it up in this packet. A small fee for them to do a district scorecard, which is the results that we got. And then for this first year, we are also paying a very small fee for coaching phone calls, for a series of 4 coaching phone calls with Gallup.
Okay, so one, I won't mind seeing those numbers.
Yeah.
2, even if it is free, it's not free because you're using your time, students are losing class time and things like this. So one thing I think we need to think of, is this any good for us at all? And I looked at it last night, and my first thing was, does the administration actually believe this? So you, Mike, Rebecca, all these people actually think that we should measure entrepreneurial aspirations and career financial literacy as they're defined here? Like, I got a lot out of the engagement and the hope, but the other 2 for 5th graders? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Seriously?
The time for the survey is very brief. It's 10 minutes. It's only 24 questions, but true that it's grades 5 through 12. So like career and financial literacy and the entrepreneurial questions are much more relevant at the upper grades in the high school.
Okay, so I would either not give that to our students, or at least I wouldn't share the results with us. I think they're ridiculous results. Talk about the top. I only care about the top 2, engagement and hope. First question is, since we decided to actually take our time to give this, do we plan on taking any of our questions here, any of the numbers, and turning them into district-wide goals? Like, for example, the adults in my school care about me. Are we going to try to drive that number or not?
Well, I mean, first, Mike, did you want to?
Yeah, I want to go back to the prior concern about some of the entrepreneurial and career and financial literacy. I had a chance to spend a good chunk of time with the guy that wrote this survey at a recent conference, and he was talking about his level of interest and the importance of some of the entrepreneurial stuff and career and financial. He said, look, for a 3rd grade or a 5th grade student, it may not be important or relevant for them at that time that they save as money or have a bank account, but in every grade, it plants a seed that this is maybe something I should be doing, and these have lifelong consequences for students. Likewise, with the entrepreneurial aspirations, one of his points is this is an area where American kids separate themselves really distinctly from their international peers, where American kids score in a markedly different way on entrepreneurial aspirational things and understanding and interest than some kids that do very well on a PISA test, for example. So I would say that going into it, I'm more interested in engagement, but the more I talk to the folks at Gallup, the
more amenable I became to some of these other questions. The fact is, it takes a kid less than 10 minutes to do this survey, and we don't know what is exactly might grow out of some of this. So to the second part, do we want to take and make district-wide goals out of this? In my review of it, I think it both confirms some things that, at least appears to confirm some things that we have heard anecdotally and the focus groups. You want to ask students, all right, so when you answered this question, we'll pick a couple, it would be my guess. When you answered this, what were you thinking? Why did you answer this way? In my mind, I have at least one teacher who makes me excited about the future. That is a critical question. That talks about kids' connection to the adults at school, and it's something that every kid and every parent hopes that they would be able to answer yes to that. And that we have students that do not is something that's one of those that I expect we'll probably be digging down into. But Ingrid, I don't want to preclude you from answering as well.
No. No, and I, one of the, about goal setting for staff, for example, the engagement piece does align nicely with, our teaching and learning falls under Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching. So it's really a large part of her framework for teaching is how do you recognize student engagement? What does it look like in your classroom? How can you engage students more in the process? What's the difference between a student looking busy and a student really cognitively engaged in the process? And so we do a lot of that work already with teachers.
So I'll push back. I mean, Gallup's the salesman, right? They're going to tell you why it's great. And for 12th grade, it might be great. I'm just saying I don't think there's any value, and I'm the chair of entrepreneurship at the college, to talk about whether or not you think you're going to invent something or start a business. But the top two I do like, and I actually don't mind these being goals. I would just like to hear that, the part of the problem is, and Gallup says this blatantly, you can't compare this data to anybody, right? Nobody out there you can compare. So all you can do is compare it to your historic self. So the real value is in collecting the data over time. That's what the real value is. And if we wanted to drive the adults in my school care about me, or I have at least one teacher, I think that's great. And my next question would be, how do you get teachers to buy into that? When they're paid according to a salary grid, how do you get teachers to buy into that?
You know, and I think that comes down to teachers really are in it because their heart is in it. I mean, we have pretty fantastic staff members that go above and beyond to reach out to kids. And to say that this is the culture that this is our expectation, and we certainly want to recognize teachers for their efforts, that I think the buy-in piece is that they want to know that all kids feel that they have a trusted adult in their learning environment to reach out to, and they want to become a trusted adult for those students as well.
So, but with our great group of teachers that we have, our number is 4.62. So are we thinking that that's a good number or not? My answer would be slightly different. I agree. We want to hire great teachers. We want to say that that's who we are, and so we only hire teachers who care about that. I would say the tenure process has to reflect that. And I would also say you have to start taking other things off teachers' plates. Like maybe there are certain things, such as are you going to start a business in your life, and taking them out for a focus group to say, hey, why didn't you say you're going to start a business? To give teachers to say, that's the priority here. That students think that they have a friend, or that students have somebody. I mean, I think all that would be really great. What I'm missing from the report is that something we actually care about? Or are we just doing this to see how we did? Because we can't compare against these other numbers. And I really hope we focus on the top two, because I don't think for elementary school, the bottom two.
I think you can compare not just to yourselves, but
No, not at all, Mike. If you wanted to try to get here's what you could do. You could go on the island, which we've heard a lot about, could go to the 18 school districts and say, you guys do it too. We would like to be able to compare against you guys. That would be really interesting. No, they have two whole paragraphs that say, please don't even report this to the community, acting as if you can compare it. And this is what happens when they don't even try to make it like MAP or MWEA, whatever it's called. They do norming. They do national norming. These guys aren't doing any of that. That's just, yeah, of all the districts who thought this was a good idea.
But there is value potentially in looking at trends in terms of, but you could also look at against the national average, which says, hey, between 5th grade and 7th grade, this number tends to go down across the country. Ours went down too. Let's not beat ourselves up over it, because that might be just what happens between 5th and 7th grade, right? So that's where it's useful. But in terms of saying, yeah, so I mean, I think there is some value in that. But I agree with Rob. The first two I thought were great. The last two, I mean, there's one or two questions. One is, are you in a club? Well, that's technically what's in our PSP, right? So theoretically, that's a good question. That's the only question out of that group I would bother to ask, however. And then the one about entrepreneurial, while, I mean, I understand it, it begs the question, well, why don't we have another one that talks about, are you going to get a job in education? Are you going to get a job in STEM? I mean, it just seems odd why do you think you're going to start your own business? Well, yeah, it just sounds too expectation of kids, hey, you're going to be a business person. Really? Okay. It just seems a little odd that we would include that, or that Gallup would include that. But I agree with Rob. And to the other point that he brought up, which I had written down as well, if we're going to do the survey, we have to set goals against it. Otherwise, what's the point? I mean, we're just wasting people's time. So there has to be goals somewhere, whether that's at the district level or for you or for Mike or for the buildings. There has to be goals set against it. We need to determine what is a good goal to set. It's a 5-point scale, right?
Yeah.
So, is 4.5 across everything good? And as long as we can maintain that, we're happy? So I think there is a need to have some thought around what we do, because if we're going to continue to do this.
Yeah, we're definitely
There has to be
looking forward
reason
to
for
the
being.
conversations that'll come from this with the staff and the administration and the students as well, is what are some of the questions that people key into, and then starting the conversations about students that are more perceived that they're more engaged, show more hope for the future, and vice versa, like the relationships between some of the questions and engagement and hope, I think are interesting as well.
That actually worries me a little, Ingrid, those conversations. I'd be interested when you report back to see how those go.
Yeah.
Number one, why don't you just sit the kid down to begin with? And number two, you're really going to try to ask a kid, so why aren't you very hopeful about the future? Right? Why don't you have a teacher here who doesn't like you, even though Miss So-and-so is right there? Why doesn't she like you? I think those are tough conversations.
And there's actually a toolkit that you can follow, a line of questioning with students that's framed in a really positive way about like what stands out to you, what are your thoughts, and sharing with us. So it's framed a little more positively.
Yeah, I will also, I had mixed feelings about this whole report, but I do find the first two pieces of information more helpful. I'm confused by some of the information that I see in the report. One being that we have a different N for every single question. And if everybody took it unless I'm reading it wrong, but there's item responses and there's percentages of who rated what, and there are different N's for each question. So do they have the option to just not answer?
Yeah, they do.
Okay,
They do.
which impacts everything. So, yeah, that being said, so we're missing chunks of kids, which maybe that impacts your engagement, because I didn't understand maybe how that number how they came up with the percentage of people engaged overall based on all of this. But I find it interesting. But I do think that maybe going forward, it would be a more meaningful discussion at this table for us to see it after you guys have already done some of your work with it, instead of before, so that
Yes.
you can tell us what we're doing with it and focus us in on the places where you want us to focus, because otherwise it's just a minefield for us to just each pick our own stuff that we want to talk about.
And what we found helpful or useful, and what maybe we found that didn't help guide us.
And I just would add to that, assuming we're going to continue to do it, Jeff just said this, but it ties in with what Suzanne said. If we're going to do it again, we need to set goals, and we need to set goals before we do the test, and then not move the goalposts, which we have a little bit of history of once in a while doing. What is it that we want to improve? We look at this data, it's the first time we took it, and we want to improve on engagement or whatever the item is, student connection with the teacher, and here's what we want the number to be. It should be in black and white. And then how did we do against that?
Well, I know I said I wasn't asking more, but one last question. Does Gallup tell us the distribution of the responses or just the average?
Just the grand mean, but I think they have that information, but in the norming spreadsheet that we got.
No, they do give.
Oh, and in the norm comparison, which again, it's a convenient sample, and so we're not supposed to, but there, for each one for grades 5 and 7, there was about an average of 100,000 students that took the norm sampling, that comprised the norm sampling, I mean.
I guess just an observation that I find interesting, that may not be. Suzanne mentioned the different ends, the different number of people who took it, which I hadn't really noticed. We talked about entrepreneurial aspiration, which I'm personally a big fan of, but I'm not sure it's relevant in these grades. It is far and away the smallest, the least answered question, to the point where I'm not sure that the number reflects reality. So I see an N of 170 for one of them. I don't know if that's how many people actually took the test in general, maybe more. But if 200 people took the test, or 171 people took the test, only 98 answered, the other 73 just gave you their answer. Right. That it's a 0, which would bring down the number quite a bit, for whatever that's worth.
I think if you get below a certain score consistently, you'd ask the question, is it worth asking in the first place? If so many people are telling you they disagree, particularly when it comes to things like, do I plan to start my own business? Or it's like, yeah, they don't have an opinion. They're like, I don't understand what you're asking for, so I don't, yeah.
Okay, any other final comments, questions? I won't cut you off this time, Kent. Feel free.
Yeah, I have to get something in, but yeah, pretty much it's interesting. Some of the questions are entertaining, but I don't know how much you really take away from this. And I think our staff has the ability, if we really were interested in these categories, we could put together a much more meaningful survey.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a school leader, there's some high-level things that I think are of interest and I think merit exploration. So when we look at our engagement index for 5th grade, for example, 86% of our kids, and that's a pretty sizable in there, said that they have a high level of engagement there. The 5th graders across the nation were 12 percentage points below that. That's, to my mind, is instructive. When you go to 7th grade, you look at how engaged that our 7th graders are. You go from 86%, and then they're at 53%. That drops below the national norm. What's interesting then again, when you look at high school, which is not on here, but that number actually rises by 10th grade. And that doesn't happen anywhere, frankly, that middle school kids wind up being slightly less engaged than high school kids. We're 22 points above the national norm in the high school on that 10th grade item. And so something is going on, and I think that's the thing where you look at this, and if you get one thing from a survey like this that has to do with kids' sense of place and kids' sense of attachment, then it's really worthwhile. And the nice part about this survey is you do get grade by grade national norms, and these are, over 1 million kids took this nationally. So those are some of the big takeaways that I have, and they're also more simply and succinctly put than our CSCI. A CSCI winds up being the sea of data that we just don't know how to wade through half the time. And this is short and to the point. And the follow-up to it are focus groups. So you get more than just a survey point. You get conversations with kids that your social workers do with students, and then you create some sort of plan going forward from that.
And that was one other question that I had regarding CSCI is this redundant in any way to CSCI? It might be too early relative to drawing conclusions around which one we might want to go with. Do we go with both? Do we continue to do CSCI?
There's some questions that are similar about, I do something that I like at school every day, and the adults in my school care about me. There's questions that overlap, mostly in the engagement section.
Okay, I like the idea of using these types of tools to try and get some measurement of the holistic student and growth of the holistic student. So I applaud the usage of this type of stuff, and if it's statistically worthwhile, great. But I also want to make sure we're not, overburdening the kids with, hey, here's another survey we need you to take, and it's like, yeah, okay. If we've got one that does the trick, that's fine. But
Okay, thank you, Ingrid, and thank you for those comments. Let's move on to board committee reports. Board of Ed, Jeff.
The Board of Education, or the Education Committee, that's all right. Education Committee met on December 1st. Our purpose was to review the academic assessment report, which you all saw this evening. So I won't go into any great detail in terms of what was discussed because the finished product is on the board. I would like to echo what others had said and reiterate what I mentioned as well, and that is to thank Susan and Rebecca for the outstanding job with the report itself, and thank them for taking the time to bring it in front of the committee and listen to our feedback and incorporate it where necessary. So thank you very much for that. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 12th at 8:30 here at the West Campus. That's it.
Questions for the Ed Committee? We move to the Board Finance and Operations. Tom Ford, he is not here. Anyone else want to on that committee? Okay, we'll move on to the Policy Committee. Kent.
Sorry, Finance and Ops had not met.
Finance and Operations has not met, Eileen tells us. Thank you.
And
No, thank you. Finance, great, thank you. Policy Committee, Kent.
we've had no meeting, and we're looking forward to our first one in 2018, so nothing to report.
Fantastic. Comments or questions for policy? Okay, Compensation Committee, Rob.
Compensation has not met.
Questions, comments for Compensation Committee? Joint Shared Services Committee has not met. We now move on to liaison reports. NSSED, Suzanne.
As Mike had mentioned, the vision, mission, beliefs, a statement of purpose have been developed in this strategic planning process. On December 8th, he and I were both at a meeting of the 18 member district superintendents. I think most, if not all of them, were there to review and discuss it, and it was a very positive meeting. And so the plan right now is for the Leadership Council to have the strategic plan, including goals and objectives, presented at our January meeting. So I'll report back on that. Also, I had an addendum added to this report at our last Leadership Council meeting on December 6th. Debbie Doyle, Mary Morgan Ryan, who are both administrators at NSSED, and Dr. Kevin Rubenstein, who is from Lake Bluff, presented an overview of ESSA. And I thought it was a really nice presentation, and I hope that all of you will have time to sort of look it over. I think it's important for us to have an understanding of that. There is an Illinois ESSA plan. It does factor into goals that the state has that we are a part of. And so understanding how that's going to roll out and have an impact is important. And then I am attending the TASH conference in Atlanta later this week. I leave tomorrow night, and we'll be there for 3 days. And TASH is a international leader in disability advocacy, founded in 1975. They advocate for human rights and inclusion for people with significant disabilities and support needs, those most vulnerable to segregation, abuse, neglect, and institutionalization. And that is from their website. So I am going to that as the leader of NSSCD's Leadership Council, and we are taking 2 staff members and another Leadership Council member as well. Our next meeting is January 10th.
Thank you, Suzanne. Any questions for Suzanne on NSSED? Our legislative liaison, Tom Ford, is not here tonight, so we go back to Suzanne for the Spirit of 67 Foundation.
The Spirit of 67 has not met.
APT exec, Jeff.
The APT Executive Board did not meet in December. The next meeting is scheduled for January 10th.
Thank you. Questions on APT for Jeff? All right, we have one more liaison report. Suzanne has asked to give us a report on the joint annual conference that she recently attended. Suzanne.
So the joint annual conference was held November 17th to 19th here in Chicago. It's also known as the III. And attending this year's joint annual conference, I found to be another worthwhile learning experience. Having the opportunity to learn alongside other board members, to listen to the challenges their boards face, to have time with local board members outside of our meetings was very valuable. It also serves as a reminder of all the resources available to us through IASB. When we were elected to these positions, we did not automatically gain an understanding of what effective governance looks like. It is something that we as a group have to seek to understand as we serve our community. And this conference also provided some insight into issues that are impacting schools across the state and nation, as well as an update on legislative perspectives at the state level. I will let you read the rest of my report on your own. If you have any questions, please let me know. I attended a couple of legislative panels that were very interesting. A couple of the things that they were speaking about, in addition to ESSA, but ESSA came up and how that's going to be implemented came up. Also, the evidence-based funding and how that's going to be put into place was much a topic of discussion. There was some discussion about property tax legislation, although that didn't appear to be going anywhere. But there was also some discussion on teacher shortages, and that appears to be something that is having an impact across the state that they are concerned about and looking at.
Thank you, Suzanne. Questions or comments for Suzanne? Seeing none, we move on to our second public participation. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board before we move to action items? Seeing none, we move to our action items. The first action item is the adoption of the 2017 levy. May I have a motion to adopt the 2017 levy?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any comments or discussion on the 2017 levy? Seeing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the Perkins and Will Professional Services proposal for boilers, air handling units, and electrical panels for Deer Path Middle School in an amount not to exceed $180,900?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Comments or discussion on this item?
I actually hit the button so you could hear me. The projects that we're discussing are replacement of a boiler, replacement of certain items in a building. And I appreciate that. We're paying $180,000 for an architect's services. Exactly what services are they providing? To me, it's you replace a furnace in your home, they go in, remove it, take it out. We're not replacing ductwork, we're not replacing electrical systems, we're just getting a commodity. Why 180,000?
Yeah, it's not quite as simple as replacing like for like. Some of these are actually improvements over even the type that we have. For example, I think it is the boilers will be completely redone and changed over to a new type of boiler system. So included in the architect fees is also all of your mechanical work. So they develop and write all of our specifications. They will assist us in the bid process. They actually review those, and then they also sign off on those projects, monitor it during the actual project itself, but then also sign off on completion.
Okay.
So it's pretty complex. This is about just over a $2.5 million project.
Yeah, I get it, but nonetheless.
Essentially, you're paying for a project manager. It's a $2 million+
Well, that's all.
replacement, and they are going to act as somewhat our
Well,
contractor.
They sign off on certain things as you go along. You actually have Pepper Construction that will work on your actual project management. So that was included in that, if you
Right.
remember the summary that I gave you.
Oh, all of the above. We are kind of outsourcing project management of this work to a certain extent.
Yes,
That's part of what's being covered.
that's part of the total project cost.
Okay.
That's not part of the 100 and, that's,
Yeah,
I
it
heard you
is.
right, that's not part of the 181,000.
No,
That's
if
above and
I'm
beyond.
referring to the summary that I sent to the board and I passed out at the last special meeting, which shows, and I think I had it in a previous communication to the board, which had the change in it, you will see a line in there for construction management, which is different than your architect and your mechanical.
Oh, okay.
As well. So this,
Jeez, okay.
A strange question, but is DPM air conditioned?
most of DPM is air conditioned, yes. That was done, I believe, as Project 2000 or so. They might have come back and finalized a few spaces after that, but yes.
Other questions or comments on this item? Okay, then I guess we will go to a roll call vote, please, Eileen.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Move to approval of Perkins and Will Professional Services proposal for the Cherokee Playground in an amount not to exceed $8,000. May I have a motion to approve that?
Actually, I'd like to ask that this be tabled. There was some discussion earlier. I think we need further discussion as a board to go ahead.
So we have a counter motion to table the item to approve the Perkins and Will Professional Services proposal for the Cherokee Playground in an amount not to exceed $8,000. A motion's been made for that. Is there a second to Kent's counter motion?
Second.
Comments or discussion regarding the motion to table the item?
Yeah, I'll second what Kent said relative to, I think we as a board need to get some clarity around exactly what's going into a potential cost relative to redoing the Cherokee Playground. At the same time, I think we need to come up with some expectations around what should drive major overhauls to playgrounds and other types of areas like that. And I think we just need to get a better handle on what the actual costs are and what's included in that cost. So I agree that it would make sense to table this for at least another meeting to have that conversation.
I agree wholeheartedly with what both of you said, and I'll add, in addition to those criteria you mentioned, even how it fits into the big picture and the other list of projects. I'm in agreement with both of you. Other comments or questions? So Eileen, we'd like a roll call vote, please, on Kent's motion to table this item.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mrs. Levert? Oh, I'm sorry, she's not here. Mrs. Sands?
No.
You don't want to table the motion? Okay. Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
So the tabled motion carries.
Thank you. So that motion has been tabled. We move on. The next motion, or the next action item rather, is the approval of kindergarten recommendation to eliminate the extended day kindergarten fee. May I have a motion to approve the may I have a motion to approve the kindergarten recommendation to eliminate the extended day kindergarten fee?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. Comments or discussion on this?
When will we hear next about this, Mike? About just what we're planning for kindergarten next year, how we communicate to parents and things like that. It must be, like, somebody starts registering these kids too.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what the next meaningful update, when that would wind up being.
Well, we'll need to be really, really soon because they'll start doing those kindergarten pre-registrations in, I believe, January. So we will start building our behind-the-scenes work now.
And somehow we have to build what we're going to tell parents, because they still will have two options presently. And so
Right.
we do need to have all that done.
but-
So I'm certainly in favor of eliminating the fees, but I would like, if there's a presentation or something, I think should happen soon.
I think probably February, March, after we have numbers, and then also have a direction for the program as well.
Yeah, but we're going to.
How can you get numbers without telling them what
Yeah.
the difference between half-day and full-day will be?
And whether we're going to offer it from, bell ring to bell ring, or whether you're going to come up with a hybrid of another option. I mean, we got to come up to that before you start registering people, right?
And what, if I go half-day, what am I missing?
Right. Yes.
My only wonder here is this for this table to work out?
No,
Because the questions that I'm hearing are how we're going to do it. I think the question that's being asked tonight is what we're going to do. Are we going to eliminate these fees? And that's what we need to decide. But how you then proceed with kindergarten?
Rob's question was simply, when are we going to hear something next?
I'm not saying we have input on what happens next. I think,
just want to know when
I think for people who watch on TV, they might want to find out that way. I think we as ambassadors of the community should be able to say what's happening. So that's all I want. And I mean, as Mike said, they have to figure this out soon. So.
Yeah, so yeah, maybe that would be the meaningful thing, is just to give more small updates rather than trying to hold everything until one point. So yeah, so we'll give a progress report of whatever kind in January then.
And I think it's helpful to just, from a public perspective, to remind people that this is elimination of the extended day fees, not any other fees that might go along that have previously gone along with kindergarten. And it's a TBD relative to any additional transportation costs as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, other comments or questions or discussion on this item? Roll call vote, please, Eileen.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the furniture purchase Phase 2 in the amount of $246,756.51?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Comments or discussion on this item?
Just a quick question. Assuming we approve, how quickly will this be delivered? How quickly will it be in use?
So the typical timeline is about 12 weeks from when we order, and then, we get the furniture in sometime after that. So, Jen, I don't know if you have any sort of further insight. Brittany is the furniture orderer in chief, as it were.
So usually they tell us 6 to 8, 10 to 12 based on when you're ordering it. So in November you approved. I just got notification on Friday that one of our orders available winter break. So depending on color choices, etc. So it's all item variants. So we're taking it as it comes in. So I would anticipate no later than spring break for these items, but that's the lead time I have right now.
So, Mike, related to Kent's question, so he asked when it's coming in. You've shared with us, we've asked you before, I don't know, a month ago, when would it necessarily go into the classrooms, which may be different than when it arrives, and you've given pros and cons, for doing things over the summer because you can clear rooms out better versus getting it. So that was a month ago. Where do we stand now? Brittany just said some of it may arrive as soon as winter break or certainly spring break. What's the current thinking of what we're going to do with this furniture?
Yeah, so we'll be, we have some, if it needs assembly or whatnot, you put it together, and then building by building, we start to put it in classrooms. We're currently going through the, I would say, the grieving process that some teachers have, and they need to thin some stuff out. And they'll be doing that for both the furniture and also for the lights. So as it comes in, we'll be putting it in classrooms.
I know you shared with us an issue is the old must go. Will it be that black and white?
The old furniture, we are going to have to, it's going to be an ongoing effort to cull the sofas and lawn furniture and whatnot out of the classroom. So yes, we want the old furniture to be out of the classroom.
And Jen, just for clarity / transparency, this is the second order. I think you've shared with us before. It's the second of a projected 3 orders. The first one was a ballpark 200. This is ballpark 250. The third one, which we expect in January, is going to be a bigger number. The 3 of them are going to add up to about ballpark 2 million. So we're looking at $1.5 million, give or take, in the January. Is that?
That was the original estimate that we had, was around $2 million. I would say that these first 2 orders came in probably less than we anticipated. But that's really a better question probably from Judy. I mean, I can't price it out until I get the specifics of the order.
Right. But for your financial planning, we're breaking into 3 orders, but you're planning on the total being approximately 2 million?
I've run scenarios with 2 million.
Fair enough. Thank you.
So this might be a question for Judy, in which case we don't have to answer it, but how much cushion is built in terms of the amount of furniture we're buying?
That's a question for Judy.
Okay.
And then I have a question that might be for Judy, but and this is probably going further into the weeds than need be, but in just looking at some of the things that are being ordered, I'm just curious, what was the process for determining which, we've got these hokey or stools. I'm just curious, what was the process for saying that's the right thing to order for these classrooms? Was it all based off of the test classrooms and whether kids in that one classroom for that grade said we like this, or was there any additional surveying done, or what?
That would be Judy or Mike, probably answer that one too.
Yeah, so it's a combination. Yeah, I've been thrown. No, no, there is. We went from you can have from this many items, and there was like a palette of things that could be selected from the exact process that Judy went through in order to get that. I can't tell you what that was, but you have to limit what people can select from, and then there's some latitude within that, and that's how much I know about that.
Any others?
So just so everyone's aware, it's not going to come as a big surprise. I'm going to vote no again because I think we should have talked more about the borrow before the vote, and I don't see the urgency of this vote.
Anything else? Roll call vote, please, Eileen.
Mr. Novitt?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
No.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the AT&T Master Agreement Contract?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any comments or discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Borkowski?
I'm sorry, were you question?
So the recommendation that Jordan has given on at least one, maybe more, is not with the lowest bidder. Is that an issue at all from a legality perspective or school code perspective, or?
For technology bids, we're not required to bid it out, so we
Okay,
bid it out.
So we're approving this as more of a above board transparency issue than necessarily we're required to do
I mean,
this? Because it's under 25,000?
All the contracts in total will be above $25,000, so for transparency's sake,
Okay.
I felt it should go to the board.
But each contract is under 25, so.
Absolutely.
Okay. No, I appreciate you bringing it forward, and the work looks great, and we're still saving money. As you've pointed out in your recommendations, at least one of them, wasn't the lowest bidder that you were recommending. I just want to make sure that's not a concern.
It's not for me, no.
So I know you're going to find this shocking, Jordan, but after reading the great assessment report and the Gallup report, I did start to gloss over when it got to the AT&T contracts.
You didn't like 40 pages of dense contracts?
I know. But my question is, so I'm sure it's all in there, but I missed it. So these are monthly costs, right?
Correct.
And how many months is the contract for?
36.
So we're basically taking a more expensive provider for maybe $2,500 a year. So in 3 years from now, we spent $7,000 more. And at that point, if I'm reading what you're saying correctly, the other low-cost providers may have something to bring to the table then because of our new infrastructure of some sort. Is that all correct?
It's also, I mean, a huge piece is also getting AT&T to bring their fiber into our building. When we bid out our internet service in 2 years, that will make it a lot more competitive.
And so it'd be safe to say that the $7,500 extra dollars, that would be worth it alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're not getting U-verse in this, are we? Because
You know, I can call them and we can try and get the sports
I have them at
bundle
home,
in,
and
but-
frankly, they leave a lot to be desired.
Yeah, I can say actually, you know, I've had a number of AT&T reps in my day. The service we get here, I mean, luck of the draw or whatever, we have actually a pretty good service with them and relationship.
Any other insightful comments from board members? All right, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Borkowski.
Aye.
Dr. Lemke.
Aye.
Mr. Novot.
Aye.
Mr. Folker.
Aye.
Mrs. Sands.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the AT&T managed internet service pricing schedule?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Comments, discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Folker.
Aye.
Mr. Novot.
Aye.
Mrs. Sands.
Aye.
Dr. Lemke.
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski.
Aye.
Motion carries.
May I have a motion to approve the AT&T managed internet service business voice over IP service addendum to pricing schedules?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Comments or discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Novot.
Aye.
Dr. Lemke.
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Folker.
Aye.
Mrs. Sands.
Aye.
Motion carries.
May I have a motion to approve AT&T IP flexible reach, AT&T IP toll-free, and AT&T voice DNA pricing schedule?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Comments or discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Borkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Folker.
Aye.
Mr. Novot.
Aye.
Mrs. Sands.
Aye.
Dr. Lemke.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the human resources items as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Comments, discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Folker.
Aye.
Mrs. Sands.
Aye.
Dr. Lemke.
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Novot.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We now move to the consent agenda. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of a board member. I will now read the consent agenda items. Approval of disbursements, payroll, and financial statements dated November 2017. Minutes of a regular meeting and workshop, November 14th, 2017. Minutes of an executive session, November 14th, 2017. Minutes of a special board meeting, November 29th, 2017. Minutes of an executive session, November 29th, 2017. Disposal of audio recordings, February 23rd, 2016. Does any board member wish to remove any item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Comments on the consent agenda? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Novot.
Aye.
Mrs. Sands.
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Folker.
Aye.
Dr. Lemke.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. FOIA requests? We have no FOIA requests this month. I'm sure that'll change next month. Announcements, Tuesday, December 12th, Orchestra Winter Concert, grades 6, 7, and 8, 7 p.m. auditorium. Thursday, December 14th, choir concert, grades 6, 7, and 8, 7 p.m. in the auditorium. Friday, December 15th, 2017, winter break begins at the close of the school day. Wednesday, January 3rd, 2018, school reopens. Monday, January 15th, 2018, there is no school. Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018, your next Board of Ed meeting right here in the West Campus Boardroom. May I have a motion to adjourn to executive session?
So moved.
Yes, executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or discussion? We won't have any. Voice vote. All in favor of moving to executive session?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Let me tell you, the cookies better be there.
A roll call vote, please, Eileen.
Thank you. Sorry.
Mr. Folker.
Thing.
Aye.
Mr. Novot.
Aye.
Dr. Lemke.
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Sands.
Aye.
I've never heard so much enthusiasm.
Thank you so much, Eileen and Suzanne. We now move this, we're moving to executive session, so I'm not really adjourning. Thank you.